At first glance, the opening Sidra of Bamidbar, the Book of Numbers, which we begin reading tomorrow, yields very little inspiration. It begins with a census of the Israelites, counted tribe by tribe, with a list of every male from the age of 20 years and upward, all those able to bear arms. And then the list of names of those from each tribe who are to assist Moses, and the numbers of men eligible to fight. 46,500 enrolled from the tribe of Reuben, 59,300 of the descendants of Simeon, 45,650 registered from the tribe of Gad, and so on. The total sum, 603,550, about 100,000 more military personnel than Ukraine's current army, which includes reservists and paramilitary units. The military imagery continues with the geometric classification of each clan. Encamped beneath its own flag around the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, 3 tribes to the east, 3 to the south, 3 to the west, and 3 to the north, all 12 set at a distance, allowing the Levites, the priestly tribe, who weren't part of the conscripts, to camp around the tabernacle and to stand guard over it. The Levites receive some prominence in this first parashah of Bamidbar, with a separate census and a description of their role in erecting and dismantling the tent of meeting, as and when the Israelites rest and move on in their journeys through the wilderness. Bamidbar, then, is framed by not just one census, but 2 censuses, this one at the beginning and another one towards the end of the book in chapter 26. Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, in her commentary on the Book of Numbers, which is called Bewilderments, a name that plays on the Hebrew name of the book, Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness, draws attention to the nature of both countings. Both anticipate, she says, the imminent wars of conquest of the land of Israel. And yet, she adds, between these 2 moments, a whole generation dies. What separates the 2 moments of counting is a total shift in population. We are scarcely aware of the 38 years that pass in Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, and yet on more than one occasion, God declares to Moses, "Your carcasses shall drop in this wilderness, while your children roam the wilderness for 40 years, suffering for your faithfulness until the last of your carcasses is down in the wilderness." Only 2 men survive from the generation to come out of Egypt. Joshua, son of Nun, who is to be Moses' successor, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who with Joshua was part of the delegation of the 12 spies, that's your Torah portion, Ida, who went to scout out the land of Canaan. Given the aspirations with which our book begins, and the repeated episodes of mutiny against God, against Moses and Aaron, which occur in successive parashiot, the book loses that anticipatory expectation of new life in the land and becomes instead a book about a generation that repeatedly looks back into the past, resenting their present existence. In chapter 11, for example, the riffraff, the asaf suf as they're called in Hebrew, feel a gluttonous craving, and the Israelites weep and remember the fish, as they say they used to eat for free in Egypt, the cucumber, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Whether this is the truth of their existence in Egypt or an implanted memory caused by hunger and the sameness of the flavor of the manna is not clear. These complaints surface again in chapter 14, after the episode of the spies, where the Israelites avow it would have been better for them to go back to Egypt rather than to fall by the sword in the land, where the scouts seemed like grasshoppers compared to the gigantic stature of Israel's inhabitants. And in a third passage, following the death of Miriam, where the community are without water, that's your portion, Jane, the people quarrel again with Moses and Aaron, asking, "Why have you brought us into this wilderness, for us and our animals to die here? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink." Aviva Zornberg sees this book, then, in this very macabre way, as recording a death march, as she calls it, as the generation who come out of Egypt die in the wilderness. It is a book, she says, about the failure of a great enterprise, which is positioned at the very heart of the book, in that physical and metaphysical space that is called Midbar, wilderness. This disappearance of a whole generation of Israelites in the desert recalls a single episode at the beginning of the book of Exodus, when Moses, as a young man, first time we meet him as a young man as opposed to a baby, sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. And looking about him, he strikes down the Egyptian and hides him in the sand. And I wonder if this single episode represents and portends the inversion of what is to happen to the Israelites in the desert. They disappear like the Egyptian into the sands of nothingness. Challenged by two Israelites the following day, Moses flees to the land of Midian, becomes a shepherd working for his father-in-law Jethro, and in the moments before he discovers the burning bush and is commissioned by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, we are told that he led his flock, Achar Hamidbar, into the furthest reaches of the wilderness. Literally, he goes after the wilderness. I wonder if the wilderness is what we all fear, that no man's land of nothingness, where nothing grows, where there is no water and no food. We fear our own self-erasure, slipping into the sands, our roles as sons and daughters, sisters or brothers, partners, parents, friends, workers and contributors, to be forgotten. The wilderness is that transitional space between the old and new, between memory and hope. It is where our lives hang in the balance, where we are fearful of letting go of the past security of our Egypts, and even more frightened of an unknown, unrevealed future ahead. And yet the Midbar, the wilderness, as the Hebrew name reveals, is also the place of davar, the word, speech, revelation, happening. When Moses goes after the Midbar, he is not only going into the furthest reaches of the wilderness, the Midbar, he is subconsciously chasing after the devarim, it's the same root, the same letters, chasing after the words that are to be spoken at Sinai. It is here in the wilderness, in this silent, unmarked place, that the voice of God will resound. In some ways, Shabbat places us in our own midbar, in our own desert, between yesterday of Egypt's unrewarded labor and tomorrow's promised lands. Shabbat, which bids us to be still, to abstain from work, to refresh ourselves, allows us to listen to the word, the words, the things that matter, raw and undigested, truthful things about ourselves, about the world, about God. And facing that requires inner courage, patience and hope and faith. May Shabbat grant us all those things and hold us in its gentle and open embrace of repair and restoration. Amen.